Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Arctic Frontiers and our next and final big picture session of the day, the space to collaborate. Now, of course, as we've been saying all day today, the Arctic is becoming more connected, more dynamic, more active, but also more competitive and more contested. Security here today can no longer just rely or just be managed at sea. It increasingly depends on space. Of course, no nation can do this alone, and Arctic security, like everything else, depends on cooperation among EU institutions, among all stakeholders, Arctic nations, NATO allies, business leaders, civilian leaders, and of course, indigenous communities themselves. Now, space, as you all know, has historically been this safe zone for international collaboration. Even as nations faced rising tensions and rifts, they still worked together. Now, with the ISS, the International Space Station, coming close to its decommissioning in just a few years' time, this could usher in a new era for multipolar space economies, national stations, commercial players, and a new set of competitions and competitors coming together to influence what is going on in orbit. One of the key questions that we will be answering here today is how can Arctic and European partners turn this collaboration into real capability, into resilience and strategic autonomy? How can space cooperation reshape Arctic security? We'll have 2 rounds of discussion here today. First round will focus on policy and strategic priorities. The second one will focus more on space governance and industry collaboration. So, can Europe develop its own space capabilities, and what will this mean for the wider Arctic region? It's a pleasure to welcome our first set of panelists. Please join me in welcoming Cecilie Myrseth, Minister of Trade and Industry of Norway. Please join me on stage. Let's also welcome Geraldine Naja, who is the Head of Industrial Policy at the European Space Agency. And last but not least, Henry Burgess, Head of the Arctic Office of the UK's Natural Environment Research Council, NERC. Welcome to you all. Here, Henry. Thank you. All right, I'll grab this chair with an iPad, and hopefully we'll go to some questions from the audience later on in this session. But let me begin with you, Minister Myrseth. I know that you and obviously your ministry oversee Norway's space industry. Today, how would you describe Norway's space capabilities, and indeed, how would you describe the wider European space strategy? How crucial are they both for the Arctic security in the long term?
Well, thank you so much for an important question. I'm so glad that also this year space is an important topic on the Arctic Frontiers conference, because it belongs here. Our ambitions is to be home to world-leading businesses, research institutions, and of course have a launch site. In short, we want to be Europe's gateway to space. More specifically, we aim to lead the way in situational awareness in the Arctic, make Andøya one of the world's most desirable launch sites for satellites, and place ourselves in the forefront when it comes to the civil-military space cooperation. And I also have to say, when we are in Tromsø, we have this world-leading Earth observation environment, which also is quite important, because Arctic has become a hotspot for international debate and, of course, also ambition. As we who live here and has always been here, we have always known. But the world is looking to the Arctic now in the new way. And I believe that Europe as a whole has to take a bigger role. We have to cooperate more to strengthen ourselves when it comes to space. And that's important when it comes to competitiveness. Draghi, the report from Mario Draghi, also mentioned space because it's important. And it comes to innovation, research, but also security and military defense. It will be important. So we are going to launch a white paper on space next year. So that's why I have said that 2026 has to be a space year in Norway. And when I visit my colleagues in the other European countries, they have the same point of view. And it was also the topic when we had the ministerial ESA conference in Bremen, now in November. And of course, it was a pleasure for me to then extend my German stay and go to Munich and visit ISAR. I've said it sometimes because I'm quite proud. I've been inside of the third rocket from ISAR. So when the third one is up in the air, I know I was inside. But this is, I think it's a picture on what you can actually do together when you cooperate. And of course, Norway, Germany has been close allies when it comes to industry for a long, long time. But what we see now, we have these startups in Germany making contracts with Kongsberg and other. And when they now are coming to Andøya, this place on an island, not really big place, but big things are happening there. 30 seconds of success it was. Last year, it was the first launch from European soil. So I'm quite proud, and I may know that the capabilities we have especially in the north, makes us a front runner when it comes to the Arctic knowledge and the future for space also in Europe. So we have big ambitions together with the industry.
Clearly, Norway has big ambitions when it comes to space and is really taking the lead in terms of investing and putting that to work. But I wonder, being in Tromsø, I think it's worth talking a little bit more about this new European Space Agency. Besides increased visibility, can you point to any concrete security vulnerabilities that this could address?
Well, you know, what we are doing with our capability, KSAT here in Tromsø, they have surveillance, they are downloading important data which are crucial for the maritime traffic when we have avalanches going on in the mountains, which happens quite often here. We are using data knowledge that we get from these satellites. So in our everyday life, we need it. But when space is going to be more important when it comes to the defense, it's because we see it. We see it in Ukraine. We see the knowledge that they use. And we know that if we are going to strengthen ourselves in Europe, space has to be a crucial part of it. And then we have to use more money, of course, but also we have to strengthen the environments that we already have. And it has to be research and knowledge based. And we have that because we have the access to the polar orbit as we have here.
But as you mentioned yourself, Arctic security today already relies extensively on satellite for surveillance, for navigation, for communications. Does it make much sense to invest so much in a new center rather than build on the existing capabilities?
Yeah, you think about the ESA Center,
yes,
the Arctic Center. Yes, it's important. And I also, the day we signed the agreement in Bremen, I was of course proud because it's a applause to all of those who have been working for a long time to get us on the map with our knowledge. But it's not just for the Arctic. It's not just for Norway. This is for Europe because Europe has to increase their knowledge on Arctic, and that is what we're going to get with this European center based in Tromsø for Europe. So yes, we need it.
Yes, you need it. Geraldine Nasser, do you agree? Is this absolutely needed? Is it an effort to strengthen Arctic security, or is it more of a PR exercise? And I know we were speaking, you and I, earlier. You said that space is more relevant today for the Arctic than any other region. How does this help?
Yes, I absolutely think that the Arctic Space Center is essential. I was discussing at lunchtime. Here we are at a very specific place. here is, in a way, the gatekeeper, I was told, towards the northern routes, which will open for the navigation of the ship. Obviously, the Arctic also has very specific means which cannot fully be covered by the existing means. For instance, weather forecasting. We have needed to build new weather satellites to really bring to the Arctic region the same precision and quality as the weather forecast on other more southern areas. And this works well, and it will become an operational service delivered by EUMETSAT. Also, we see it in the current geopolitical context. Yes, you said it yourself. The Arctic is contested. The Arctic is a very specific region. It's rich in certain minerals. It has also a huge maritime territory. And we need to ensure the security of this huge maritime area. Also, a security not only in terms of defense or resilience, but also for the economy. It's a huge fishing area. You have also all the oil rigs, the pipelines, etc. So there are really very specific needs to the Arctic. And for me, the Arctic Space Center is a way to gather what we already have in terms of Earth observation, many services brought by the Copernicus system of the EU and ESA for the environmental monitoring, which also is specific to the Arctic. If you look at permafrost, if you look at algae bloom, etc., these are also quite specific needs. So we need to bring all these needs together in the Arctic Space Center and see how we can deliver the adapted systems, which may also benefit other regions, by the way, but this is something else.
How do you respond to critics who say that Europe is moving too slowly in space, that it isn't investing enough, that it remains heavily US dependent? Because when you consider it, most European satellites today are still being launched by American companies. Should Europe be investing more in its own domestic launch capabilities?
There you will allow me to disagree.
Please.
ESA is 50 years old. Mm-hmm. It is true that ESA has not the same level of funding as NASA. Mm-hmm. It has something like 5 to 6 times less. Still, we have Galileo, our navigation system, which is more precise than the GPS. We are leading in terms of earth sciences, of environmental monitoring. Our weather forecast systems brought by satellites is also more modern and precise. So I think with the lower budget, we have achieved a lot. We're also leading in space science, I mean, in many, many areas. Now, when you talk about launchers, first of all, the fact that we have been depending on US launchers is a matter of 1 year. 1 year. Why? Because we stopped having the Ariane 5 generation in 2023, and we started the Ariane 6 in 2024. So for 1 year, we didn't have any Ariane, we didn't have Vega, and we did launch with SpaceX. Right. 1 year. But now we have Ariane 6 fully operational, fastest ramp up. We have Vega C also operational. Soon we will have, I turn to ISR, but there are others, we will have European developed launchers. So we are not depending on the US anymore.
But aren't you? Because the majority of European satellites are still being launched by a private US company, which is SpaceX.
No, they are not. We are now, I mean, that has been the case, but now we are launching with Ariane.
So you're beginning.
Yes, and by the way, we are not only launching European satellites. If all goes well, on 12th of February, which is next week, we shall launch the first batch of satellites from the Amazon constellation. So actually, it could perhaps become the other way around, you see.
Okay. Well, hopefully it will. Henry Burgess, how long do you think this process might take? Because I think I'd be correct in saying that Europe has historically underinvested in space, certainly when you compare it to the investments made by the United States. So Europe's total spending on space, for example, over the last 40 years, amounts to just about 15 to 20% of the investments made by the United States on space activities during the same time frame. Can European nations catch up?
I'm sure they can. When we think about space in the context of the Arctic, we often think about countries proclaim to be the nearest Arctic state. We've done that in the UK. But actually, the stratosphere is the nearest state, if you like, kind of to the Arctic. And so kind of the importance of the UK, European partners, allies working together, having a sovereign capability, because that's increasingly important, but working together to maximize the benefits of what we can do in the Arctic is really, really important. And it's about imaging, it's about communications, it's about awareness, it's increasingly about coordination and control of all the monitoring systems that we need in the Arctic. So I'm sure we have that capability.
How does the UK-Norway agreement that was signed in December expand this sort of space collaboration between the two nations?
Would you like to?
The UK-Norway defence agreement that was signed had an important component about space.
Yes, of course, it's a lot about, of course, defense in it, but when defense is mentioned, it's important that space is as well. And we want to use that also to strengthen our relations with UK. So I have met with Liz, who was going to be here. We had an important meeting in Bremen during the ministerial meeting, and I hope to see her again quite soon in London to discuss how we can develop this further on, because we have to strengthen the European competitiveness also when it comes to space. And then the EU is, of course, really important for Norway because we are part of the EEA, but UK is as well. And we are strengthening our bonds when it comes to defense, but also industry, energy, and space has to be part of this mix. But it's too early to go into all of the details of how we're going to do it. But it will be important, and we have to find out how to actually make things happen together. But we have same common goals when it comes to the access to space. Has to be on equal terms, and we are spending a lot of money on the ESA programs, which we decided how to spend the money in November. But I'm looking forward to the dialogue with the UK.
How much of the space focus for Norway is on defense and security? And how much should there be more focus on civilian, industrial, and research partnerships?
Well, we are in the start of making our new space policies. So if I were to give you the answers now, we wouldn't have to use a year for making them. But the dual use when it comes to space is important, and we have to think more dual when it comes to how we develop the industry, how we use our money when it comes to research, innovation, because they're so linked together. And just look at Andøya. It's important for NATO, it's important for the defense, but it's also important for the civilian side, commercial side. So we have to strengthen us on all of these arms in some way, and that will be the important task that I hope that we will manage when we now are developing our new space policies. And I will use a lot of my time this year to listen, to be in debates, and to get a lot of different points of view how to do it. And in this mix, how we cooperate with our partners, our allies, is also quite important for how we develop our space policies.
Geraldine Naja, are European policymakers focused on the right issues when it comes to space? Do they have the right priorities in place? And who, for you, is Europe's biggest competitor in space?
I think, unfortunately, with the current context, we have all realized how much space is a very crucial tool for security. I was telling you earlier, the US, since almost the beginning, used space as a tool for defense and security. And actually, the largest space agency is not NASA, it's DoD. In Europe, in fact, there was very little spending for military space or defense space. Now that is changing, and we saw that in Bremen, the ministerial conference of ESA, where it was recognized that we need to have tools using space, and space has become an integral part of the overall, let's say, range of means needed to have a proper defense and security system. So this is the right priority. On the other hand, there is another priority of space for Europe, and it's a very right one too. It's environmental protection. And by the way, as I was saying, Arctic is primarily concerned with those two subjects, be it environmental monitoring or security. So I believe environment, defense and security, which is new at ESA and in Europe in terms of a priority for space spending. And the third one, I think, is innovation and technology, because the best investment that Europe can do is in brains, is in ensuring that we continue to develop technology, we continue to be leading in certain systems. We have not been leading in IT, for instance, but now we have the AI challenge, and I believe that this is an area where we can fight, and we can use also, by the way, in space or in other industries. So for me, these would be the three priorities: environment, defense and security, innovation and technology.
Henry Burgess, do you agree with what you just heard there? And I wonder to what extent the United Kingdom not being a part of the EU anymore is at a disadvantage, perhaps, in the kind of partnerships that it may have going with other European nations? And do you need a cultural shift in the mindset?
I think we'll see an interesting cultural shift as we develop our own sovereign launch capability in Saxavord in the Shetlands, which is as close as you can get to the Arctic in the UK. And I think that will change the mindset. We're hoping for a successful launch later this year. No promises, but we're hoping for this year. And I think that will really change the public perception about the UK as a space power. The UK has been a member of ESA kind of right from the very start. Way before we were in the European Union, we were in ESA. And we're investing a lot within ESA. So,
how would you rate the UK as a space power? Might be a strong word, but...
I think it's for other people to
where would you rank
I think it's for other people to rate the UK rather than me do it myself. I think we have a lot of capability. We have a particular capability in that skill which is turning data into information, because there's a lot of data to gather, but it's making it into useful information that's really effective. And the UK is a leader when it comes to kind of tools in space. So when you think about space weather, about how you protect sensitive infrastructure on Earth, power systems, and how you protect satellites from solar flare events. We have a fantastic system with ISCAT, which is in partnership with Norway and Sweden and Finland and Japan to look into the atmosphere and predict those events. And we're investing kind of major amounts of money in the Vigil system, which will send a satellite deep into space to one of those deep sort of space stasis points, a Lagrange point, and it will then monitor together with satellites from the US and Korea, those solar flares to give us more notice. And more notice gives you more time to protect your assets. That's as much a resilience, a defense capability as it is a pure science mission. So yeah, the UK is investing very heavily.
What is in it for the indigenous communities in the Arctic? Of course, better defense, better security improves everyone's lives. Of course, there's more stability. But beyond that, what do you think is the key element that they stand to gain? How much does it factor in your decision making?
Well, it's important because it gives us the ability to communicate. It's important when it comes to surveillance. And those are important for everyone also living, working in the Arctic part. And what we have in northern part of Norway and in Norway is we have these integrated value chains. We have the whole value chain when it comes to space. And we can see communities and businesses are growing. You can see startups coming from it, because when we have these big motors like Kongsberg here, you can see that it's growing around it with new companies. And then you take into consideration where we are at and what are the main issues here. So it's really local and it's really international at the same time.
We talk a lot about the need for collaboration and cooperation among nations, but let's be honest, how important is it for Norway to stay ahead of the competition, given all of the investments that you are making in space?
I think it's important for everyone who is making investments and know that you have something that you are really good at. Then you are eager to just get better, and that's a healthy way of thinking competition. But competition has to be on equal terms, and that is what we have to manage inside of Europe, because we are not that big alone, but we can get more power when it comes to the space industry, the European space policies, industries as a whole, when we work wisely together. So, but healthy competition, that's good, as long as it's on fair and equal terms.
How vital is this kind of healthy competition?
Yes, competition is the basis of competitiveness. So if you don't have competition, you don't have a competitive industry. Now, of course, it's important to have a fair competition, because you have to somewhat ensure and work with newer industry or smaller industry. And at ESA we have a policy for small and medium enterprises. Also we have incubators. We have one business incubator here in Tromsø. So yes, it's important to help industry develop and grow, but then you have to go in the big bath and compete. And that's where you can create European champions, whether they be small and medium enterprises or very large integrators, but you need European champions.
And with space becoming an increasingly crowded field, a question from the audience about regulation, perhaps to you, Henry, but anyone of our panelists, please feel free to take this.
Yeah, there
a question
is perhaps on this point.
Yeah.
It's very important because the countries, and in particular the countries that launch, they usually have a space law already. But now we are going to also have a EU space law. So we have to make sure that we do not multiply the regulation, but we kind of harmonize it. That will be a thing to do.
Which brings us to the need as well to update some of these old frameworks. Which,
we presented the new space law, Norwegian one, to the Parliament this spring, and it was voted on in the Parliament, and then now it's a done deal, and that's a good thing. But we have to remember, when we are making new laws or frameworks, regulations, that simplification is one of the most important things for all of the industries and the businesses. So we can't make regulations that makes it harder, but we have to take into consideration that one is on equal terms. We have to think about it has to be sustainability in the picture, but we have to, in every new regulation we make, we have to in mind simplification, because we need and want all of these new startups to grow, because this is going to get bigger. And I think that young people around in Europe now, I hope that these smart heads people are thinking about space as a possibility.
But space has to remain a responsible
Yes.
industry.
And
this is where regulations are needed.
Of course, I am not saying that we don't need
but
regulations.
do they go against innovation and the spirit of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, but we need good regulations. And not all regulations are good. So we just have to have that in mind when we're making them. And that's
what would be good regulation? In a nutshell, if you were to just describe one element of it.
That's a question I can't give you on stage, but it's just important to say, as a politician, that when we are making these regulations, we have to have that in mind, and that's why it's important to have a dialogue with the industry themselves, because we need to have, of course, regulations, but they have to be smart. And another thing, it's on the side, but when we are having all of these debates about space, we have to remember that this is quite nerdy, what we are talking about. This is nothing that everyone, if you go out on the streets in Tromsø and you tell them about, we are really big in space. Lots of tourists though, so they don't know Tromsø that well, but if you ask the people who are living here, it's not everybody who actually understands or know that we are a big in space. Even if you can go on your cross-country skis just at the side at Kongsberg. But we have to talk about it in a way that people understand and realize that this is one of the really big industries for Europe and for Norway and for the space countries in the future. But it's also on us to make it understandable how we are talking about it. And I doesn't understand everything in the details when I am talking about space, because it's not my job. I have a lot of experts around me who are going to make the white paper together with me and make everything correct. But we have to be understandable for normal people.
And communicated
the
to
communication
the public as well.
is really important.
So a question from the audience for you, Henry. What sort of role can non-Arctic states play in the Arctic when it comes to space activities? How can Arctic states help to enhance the capabilities of those states?
Yes, I think one of the things that you can really see the non-Arctic states do is develop the products from satellite systems and space information. So in the UK, we've got really good at developing those products. So we're using a combination of satellite technology, satellite information, and AI, machine learning to do kind of real world kind of impactful activity. So we're looking at how you can better navigate through sea ice, how you can run ships more efficiently, how you can reduce your carbon footprint, how you can reduce the impact on the environment. We're working in partnership using those data products with indigenous communities in Canada, Inuit Nunangat, to think about how you can help predict certainty in sea ice so that you can kind of know where caribou herds will be at any particular point. So kind of real world products. You can use satellites to study walruses and whales from space. You can get much more accurate data in that way, more effective. That helps local communities. It helps the science community as a whole. So I think it's thinking about, yes, the raw assets in space and the ground stations, but it's particularly how non-Arctic states can add value in using the products. And there's a huge amount of potential there. We're moving into a world where increasingly there will be autonomous underwater vehicles and autonomous aerial vehicles, and using those in coordinated ways to drive up our knowledge about this undersampled area of the world is really important. And it needs space technology and AI to make that really, really effective.
And to make that happen, Geraldine, how important is it to unify Europe's space capabilities? Because Europe isn't homogeneous when it comes to the capabilities of each European nation in space. Different countries have their own different capabilities. How much does it complicate the picture?
Actually, I wouldn't say that much, because first of all, if you look at industry, it's very integrated at European level. Most of the companies we work with are not in one single country. They are in very numerous cases across Europe already. So
who is the clear leader?
Well, you have
Germany.
Sorry?
Germany.
No, you have, well, in the very large spenders, shall we say, it's Germany, France, Italy, the UK, of course, but also Spain, Belgium. Norway is spending a lot in space. So there is a very large, let's say, number of companies, but already quite Europeanized. And I think what is important is that Europe is, in a way, if we want to compete, you asked me earlier, who are our competitors? Okay, of course, we are both cooperating and competing in space. So we work with NASA, but we compete with the US industry. We work with JAXA, we work with space is primarily an area of cooperation, but of course, there is industrial competition. If we are going to be competitive, we need to work on the same scale. So in that sense, we need to unify our strengths. Industry is doing that. There are some ongoing reorganizations of industry across Europe. And I think we need to make sure that we have the national programs, the EU and ESA programs, which are very, let's say, coherent and cooperating together, and that we are not duplicating necessarily, at least not all the time, but we are using to the best possible way the relative investments.
All right, so some clear plans for the future as
Yes.
we try to,
also, because what
to
we
grow
do
this industry.
in
Very
most
briefly,
cases, sorry?
Briefly, please.
Yes.
As we're
No,
running out
what
of
we do
time.
in most cases cannot be done by one country alone. We are working with all the countries.
Your final thoughts, Henry.
It's a question of kind of countries developing that sovereign capability, but also working in partnership. And those two are not mutually exclusive. You can do all of that together, and then everyone benefits.
Minister, final word. What for you is the key?
Yeah, well, I agree. Partnership, cooperation, but also fair competition. I think that's important. But we have to together increase the European competitiveness, and that is important for the European future when it comes to space, but also innovation and the businesses. We have to be competitive when it comes to all of those. And space, I just have to say, it's so inspiring to have the possibility to be a politician with a responsible for this amazing industry in Norway, because so many things happening so fast, and the importance is just growing. So Norway will be part of everything that's going to be happening in Europe in the time to come. And I hope that we will talk about the new white paper or maybe coming up white paper next year at the same time, at the same place.
Minister Merced, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing all of these unique perspectives. Geraldine Naja, thank you so much. Henry Burgess, thank you. And as our panelists regain their seats, let's take a brief look, shall we, at where European access to space actually stands today from the vantage point of young leaders. The need for strong collaboration between established players, governments, and other stakeholders. What does it look like, and what is needed to be done? Here's a look.
If you ask me, one of the great things about space is that Norway is a space nation, and an important one, with the North right at the center of it. We have Norwegian companies building satellites, a global ground station network led from Tromsø, ensuring critical satellite data gets down to Earth, important research on the state of the Arctic, such as the ice and the environment, and a spaceport at Andøya that will hopefully soon help secure not only Norwegian, but European access to space. At the same time, one of the challenges for space companies operating in the North is the rapidly growing interest in the Arctic. With more actors, more activity, and more strategic attention, we need strong collaboration between established players, new entrants, governments, and international partners. This collaboration must balance innovation and growth with environmental responsibility, security, and sovereignty. Space assets will be critical in supporting this balance, from monitoring and connectivity to security and resilience. Since the Norwegian government gave the green light for Andøya Spaceport in 2020, the concept of responsive space has gained increasing attention. The ability to launch or replace critical space infrastructure quickly when it's needed most. This is not only for Norway, but for EU and our other allies. To summarize, here right at home, we have the space capabilities that are needed both in the Arctic and globally. The North will be central to making responsive space possible. So my question to the panel is, how do you see a truly responsive and collaborative European space capability taking shape here from the North? And what role do you see your country or organization playing in that ecosystem?
All right, perfect. Two really important questions to ask our next set of panelists. Let me invite them to join me on stage. Two business leaders operating in the Arctic with experience working with local communities. It's a pleasure to have Joseph Wiedemann with us, Sales Director at ESAR Aerospace, and Curtis Shaw, who is President of Northwest Tel, and joining us as well online, we will have her on the screen in a moment or two, is Shahinaz Bouafia, the Head of Regulatory Affairs, Space and Telecommunications at Eutelsat Group. Thank you very much for joining us. And let me start with you, Shahinaz Bouafia. I think you just heard there Nora, our young Arctic leader, ask a couple of questions to the panelists. So let me ask you your reaction or your response to her concerns. How do you make the European Space Partnership more responsive, more collaborative, and what can you, on an individual level and as a company, do to help change the landscape?
Yes, absolutely. I do hope you can hear me well. If so, I also would like to maybe thank the organizer for bringing industry voices into this discussion. It's incredibly timely, and these conversations really matter right now. So I truly wish I could be there in person. And the conference looks fantastic, but it's great to see this level of engagement around the Arctic and space issues. Maybe before I dive in and answer the question, may I explain who Eutelsat is and also maybe why it matters in the Arctic. So Eutelsat is one of the world's leading satellite operators. It was formed by the merger of Eutelsat and OneWeb 3 years ago. And for decades, we've been providing satellite communications for governments, broadcasters, and critical services worldwide. So we do operate a fleet of 34 geostationary satellites, along with a constellation orbiting in the low Earth orbit, and spanning to over 600 satellites, and also known as the OneWeb constellation. So it means that we actually now operate both GEO and LEO systems, and that's something very few operators in the world can do. And Eutelsat, as a European satellite operator, our primary mission is essentially to provide connectivity where terrestrial networks don't reach. So oceans, remote regions, and increasingly, of course, the Arctic. So for a long time, Arctic connectivity was actually a real challenge. The reason being most traditional satellites sit very high above the equator. And that means that their signal actually reached the far north at a very low angle, and if at all, actually. So that results in very poor coverage and high latency. And what has changed is the arrival of low Earth orbit satellites in polar orbits. So through the OneWeb constellation, Eutelsat is actually able to operate hundreds of satellites that continuously pass over the North Pole and the Arctic Circle. And the architecture itself is indeed particularly well suited to high latitude region. So let's maybe dive a bit further into the discussion, but I think it's really important for the audience to have a better sense of why space matters in the Arctic, and especially when it comes to connectivity services.
Can you expand just briefly a little bit more on what Eutelsat is able to do in addressing the digital divide in a region where satellite communications may be the only lifeline?
Absolutely critical. So what do our services actually enable in practice? So first, it actually brings reliable broadband connectivity to remote Arctic communities. And that's essentially where fiber or terrestrial mobile networks are either impossible or extremely costly to deploy. The second is maybe one that I actually really like in terms of use cases is the mobility use cases. Maritime traffic, icebreakers, offshore operation, and also aviation, obviously. So all of which are extremely important and if not critical in the Arctic, and increasingly active also in the region. Maybe the third one, and also to link it to the theme of this panel, is that we are able to provide the Arctic with resilient communications for emergency services, critical infrastructure, which is obviously essential in harsher environments, where networks must actually work, even in crisis situations. And last but not least, there is a strong sovereignty and resilience dimension to using space-based services when it comes to connectivity. And we do work with trusted local partners in the Arctic, in Arctic countries in general, so that connectivity can actually be delivered. So it's really about enabling secure, resilient, and sovereign communications in one of the most challenging, but also strategically important regions of the world.
Thank you very much, Shahinaz, for laying it out so well for us. Curtis Shaw, if I can turn to you, Northwestel, a Canadian telecom company that is being bought by a consortium of indigenous groups. How has that affected the day-to-day working of the company and its long-term strategy?
I think our long-term strategy remains the same. We want to provide the best possible network to Arctic and indigenous communities. We're actually a customer of Eutelsat OneWeb. We've been deploying OneWeb in our network for 3 or 4 years now. If you look at the north, there's a huge demand for services around education, health, in the residential segment, just pure entertainment, connecting kids to the digital economy for the first time. It opens up tons of opportunities. In the Western Arctic, we've done a lot with fiber optics. We've got long-haul fiber optic cable. I think we manage about 5,000 kilometers of fiber today, over 4 million square kilometers. But if you move into the eastern part of the Arctic in Canada, we have 35 communities that have no road access. Electricity is generated by diesel power, and they're reliant heavily on satellite communications. There's no fiber, there's no microwave. So we've used a number of satellite providers to try to close that digital divide and provide the best possible internet service that we can. So in terms of our strategic direction, I see a future where everyone has fast, affordable, highly reliable internet. The satellite providers are providing a very pivotal technology for us to accomplish that. I don't think it's realistic in the next decade to see every Arctic community in Canada connected by fiber. The investment is in the billions of dollars. And so that's where satellite is going to continue to play a key role in the Canadian Arctic.
Can you give us a couple of concrete examples, perhaps, about how the shift to Indigenous ownership, which I understand is still going on, it hasn't been finalized?
Hasn't been finalized yet.
But give us a sense of how it is going to affect, service delivery, investment, community engagement.
So let me just back up. If you look at the Canadian Arctic, the population of the Canadian Arctic is about 50% Indigenous, between First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. From coast to coast, it's about 50% of the population. Our company employees self-represent, or they self-declare. There's about 10% of our employees that are Indigenous. So if you look back 8-10 years ago, we set out a reconciliation plan. We started off to really look at our workforce and how does the workforce evolve to be more representative of the population we serve. So we started on this path 8 or 10 years ago, and it was really around educating employees, getting youth excited about careers in IT and telecommunications, and how do we advance employment in the north. Over the next 5 or 6 years, we started moving down paths with Indigenous communities around joint ventures, equity partnerships, sale of pieces of our equipment, supplier relationships. And so we really try to lead the private sector in northern Canada about what we can do to advance reconciliation. So a couple of years ago, there was a group put together, and they approached our shareholder, and they said, we want to buy Northwestel. And so our parent at the time hired a chartered bank in Canada. A couple of banks got involved and negotiated out a deal. So right now, if you look at northern Canada, the Indigenous groups, the Inuit, the First Nations, they want to look at how they can advance their economies, how they can make investments in telecommunications, that shows a rate of return and a dividend for those communities. And so they're excited about diversification, and there was an opportunity for them to buy the company and really look at those cash flows and how they could take those cash flows to better their home communities. So that deal was announced about 1.5 years ago. It's still in the process of being financed. So I'm optimistic. Hopefully there'll be an announcement here in the next month or two.
Is that a model that you think can be replicated elsewhere?
I think so. I think anyone in the Arctic that's working in the Arctic has to have that in the discussion about how they're engaging with communities, consulting with communities, how they're participating in the new digital economy. So I think there's applicability across many regions of the Arctic, including Alaska, Greenland, and in Europe.
Joseph Wiedemann, the company you work for, Isar Aerospace, is a German company, but it's only been founded a few years ago, 2018. How much headway has it been able to make in this, as we were saying earlier, increasingly crowded field? How much competition versus duplication is there? How healthy is it?
Maybe to give a little context, so thank you very much for the question. We're Isar Aerospace. We've been founded in 2018. Yep. Now we are about 450 people, and we're fully venture capital funded, so we have raised about €500 million for our company, and we have launched our first rocket last year here from Andoya, just a little more than a throw of a stone away, and we're having our second launch already in Andoya, and then the window opens again 19th of March. So stay tuned. You can watch it on YouTube. And yeah, this is how far we have become within just 7 or 8 years. And what has made that possible is exactly competition. Mm-hmm. So there was one call by the German government together with ESA to make a call for new launchers. And it was about €11 million. And it has allowed us to collect more than €500 million of venture capital. And this is how the story starts.
How important is it then to have this push from government? And what is still holding back other European governments, in your view?
Maybe the second part of the question is not me to answer, but the first part from an entrepreneurial side. Having the government as an anchor customer or investor is incredibly important because it shows credibility to commercial investors. So VC funds, the moment you have that government contract and it shows that they believe in you, it makes your life much easier. So it's really crucial to have the government on board as an anchor customer. The
government obviously has a stake. I think it's about 17% ownership.
Well, I cannot comment that on stage, but through various vehicles, the government might have a stake, but it's mostly commercial VC.
I want to turn back to you again, Shahinaz, and ask you how the view from your vantage point differs from what you've just heard.
Well, I wouldn't say differ that much. Actually, I think on the industry side, you will definitely see a lot of alignments around the needs, both for political and public support, either through funding, but also politically speaking. But definitely cooperation, and that's.
Have we lost our communication? Speaking of which, our satellite connection. All right, hopefully
it's a cut fiber.
We shall get it back.
Like
but perhaps we
just heard from a key element.
We are losing you a little bit, but please do go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I hope you can hear me now.
We can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so just about space cooperation. Maybe just to say, space cooperation is definitely the way to go for us industry. Space cooperation is a force multiplier, and when it comes to connectivity, surveillance, environmental monitoring, search, rescue, launch, you name it, underground infrastructure is actually sparse or non-existent.
Yeah. All right. We'll try to get back to Shahinaz, but let me put this point to you, Joseph. Talking about the European space value chain, so everything from launch to data to downstream services.
As I like to call it, ground stations.
I'll come back to you, Shanice, in a couple of seconds, if you don't mind. We'll wait for the connection to maybe settle down a bit more. I'm turning to Joseph just to ask you about the importance of making sure that the entire space value chain is European-owned from a security risk perspective. How important is that?
It's not only security. I mean, it has been discussed by the previous part of the panel. Space is part of our everyday life. I mean, think about it. Everybody in this room has used space data today. You've watched the weather forecast,
Without
you've
knowing
navigated with Google or alternative service, you've called a taxi, you've bought stocks, you went to the gas station. The oil prices are also determined by satellites, by looking on oil silos. So all these parts are intertwined in our daily life. So it's far beyond purely space. And the question we have to ask ourselves, do we want to have this infrastructure owned by a third party? Do we want to have this infrastructure controlled by a third party? And launch is the crucial part of having credibility to build this infrastructure yourself. If you cannot access space, it's nice to speak about satellites and build satellites and operate satellites, but if they were to, be disabled by whatever reason, if you're not credibility able to replace them, just to give you an example, or build up your own infrastructure, you depend on external factors.
Where is Europe strategically exposed?
Excuse me?
Where is Europe strategically exposed when it comes to space?
As
what are
the
the key
previous
vulnerabilities?
Well, I think it's more the overall scale. I think in Europe, we are in some parts really excellent on the application side. On other parts, especially on the defense side, as it was correctly highlighted, we really depend on the infrastructure of third parties. So if you look in this direction, I think Europe really has to catch up. In Germany, stating the facts, it has been recognized. There has a huge budget been announced, 35 billion, purely for space and defense context. So yeah, things are starting to get in motion, but now we need to get executing.
So when we look at the situation in the remote communities in Canada, Curtis, Northwestel relies on OneWeb, correct? Which is a UK French-owned company.
That's correct, yes. It's one of our providers. We have 3 satellite providers that we use today.
But it's often said that connectivity isn't as good as Starlink. So how do you sort of balance, priorities out? How do you balance service quality against the growing security and political risks that could be associated with relying perhaps on US-owned systems? Is that something that factors into your thinking?
Absolutely, and there's something that I would say that we've been able to do with security and reliability and network sovereignty. So the first thing that we've done is in many communities we have 2 or 3 satellite providers. We call it a multi-orbit solution. And as satellites have gone up in speed and throughput and frequency, they're more susceptible to weather interference, including Starlink. So often, if you have 2 or 3 providers in a community, one may be impacted by heavy snowfall or rain. The other one may not be, just based on frequency and where the satellites are overhead. So we've been able to concatenate satellites together, so we have multiple satellite providers working in an operation. The other thing we've done on the OneWeb network is Eutelsat has put a ground station into Yellowknife in the middle of the Canadian Arctic. So traffic will go up from the Canadian Arctic, up to the satellite, down to Yellowknife, which is in the middle of the Canadian Arctic, or central, and it goes to a Canadian data center. So it may be a European constellation, but it looks and feels like a Canadian-owned system. Traffic stays in Canada, it goes up to the satellite, down to Canada, down to a Canadian ground station. So that's a huge value add for anyone that's concerned about traffic transiting other jurisdictions. We've been able to take the service and make it a Canadian service that hits a Canadian sovereign data center, and so all the traffic can stay in Canada. So that's really important from a government operations standpoint, any sensitive critical information, to have a service that we've been able to design and use that we can say is highly secure for the Canadian context.
We spoke earlier about how space remains to a large extent a safe zone of collaboration, but it is increasingly becoming politicized, Shahinaz, and I'm thinking about Russia and China and other players, private players as well, racing to dominate Arctic satellite coverage. How does Eutelsat position itself to remain independent, secure, and reliable in this environment?
Look, from a European perspective, Europe can and should definitely develop its own space capabilities, but autonomy that does not mean isolation. So it means having trusted European controlled systems that can be integrated with partners. And that also allows me to circle back to the theme of this panel, which is space to cooperate. I think space is definitely big enough for everyone to compete and to do their best. And that's exactly the logic behind Europe investing in its own satellite systems and working with allies. And by combining European space assets, with national and regional partners in the Nordics, Greenland, etc., Europe actually contributes to real capability building while also reinforcing collective resilience for European. So low Earth orbit satellites are a good example, so you're absolutely right. We are seeing other capabilities being developed by other countries than just Europe and the US. China is also ramping up with several constellations. And but maybe to circle back to the Arctics, polar orbiting systems naturally serve multiple countries at once. And that cooperation actually allows nations to share capacity, ensure interoperability, and align also on standards for security and resilience. And when it comes to the Arctics, OneWeb and the Eutelsat constellation is actually probably, the Arctic is probably one of our biggest strong suits with a LEO constellation that fully covers the polar region today. And truly ensures secure, low latency connectivity across Arctics, Nordics, Baltics, you name it. So turning space into shared infrastructure. And definitely for us, the future of Arctic is not about one country or one system dominating. It's truly about cooperating through space and using and building on existing capabilities at the regional level in Europe.
I want to ask all the panelists about something that Minister Meerset touched on earlier about regulation, how it's important to have good and fair regulation, I think is what she said. What does it look like for each of you?
May I comment on that?
Joseph, yeah.
Because it also builds on what Jeanette just said. It's really important to have the cooperation on the government side. Common standards that are internationally applicable. So their business really collides with the regulative side, and there need to be a unified market, like Norway, European, worldwide is the best. There need to be conditions for commercial companies that are enabling. So when you do a new regulation on the public side, as Madame Meerset has correctly said, keep in mind to make it simpler for business, enable business, not to put regulation on top of regulation. And the worst thing you can do is specific local regulation. If you say then, okay, we have the European one, we have the Norwegian one, and then even a more specific one for whatever purpose. This is for business incredibly difficult.
It's a fine balance, though. How do you see it, Curtis, between the need to regulate an industry that, of course, has to be very highly responsible and accountable, and the need to allow for innovation?
It resonated to me earlier when the minister was talking about simplification of regulations. I think for me, in the private sector, the best thing that we can have for investors, for our capital plan, is really understanding what the rules of engagement are and that the regulations are efficient and well understood. And when we're launching a new internet service or launching a new telecommunication service, it's multiple levels of permitting, and it could start at a regional level or a local level in terms of land and power and interconnection, going all the way up to some of the international space regulations that we're dealing with. So multi-level, there's a need for regulation, but I think the private sector really wants to ensure that they're well understood, they're simple, they're easy to navigate, and that they're efficient, so that they don't take years in the making.
Shahnaz, what's your perspective on this briefly? Because I know you work on regulation. How much unnecessary red tape is there today?
Yeah, thanks for this question, and also resonated a lot with me earlier when our colleagues from the previous panel addressed that. I'm actually currently at the heart of where international regulation and rules for space are being drafted. So it's in Vienna. So it's a very, very timely question indeed. Look, from the perspective of a space operator, we cannot do space without being authorized by our governments, right? So regulation in itself is definitely by design something we integrate. But of course, what we do observe is more and more challenge around the notion of regulation, just because with the increase in space activities over the past years, it's definitely caught the attention, but also of the wider public. So policymakers are now increasingly looking at it. What is certain is that satellite operators, and I will speak on behalf of Eutelsat, of course, but I'm sure other operators will feel the same way. We invest billions in our space infrastructure, so it's definitely our inherent, need and also benefit to make sure that those infrastructure are preserved, and that, of course, includes responsible practices. In the meantime, it's certain that that regulation can contribute to further harmonization in terms of the rules applicable to operators, regardless of the country from which they come from or where they operate, and that will help to have further interoperability, but also further cooperation. So what we call on for as operators is further harmonization of international rules, but at the same time having something pragmatic that is realistic for operators to implement, and of course having the industry involved in the discussion to make sure that rules and standards benefit also to competitiveness and innovation.
Thank you for this, Joseph. Talking about making sure that the rules and standards benefit everyone, not just business stakeholders. How is your company, ESAR, working with local communities ahead of rocket launches? And have you encountered any repercussions, any serious concerns on wildlife, climate, and so on? Any concerns that have been relayed to you by these communities, and have you done anything about them?
Yeah, so we are in very close contact with the local community, and we see very positive feedback, actually. We work very closely on topics like fishery, for example. To give you a little context, when there is a rocket launch, there can be no boats right in front. So there is really a discussion ongoing when we can launch, when is the good time for fisheries, and so on. Now, of course, sometimes there's a conflict of interest, but so far we see very strong support, and we're very happy for the exchange with the local community. Concerning wildlife and these topics, I don't think there is a notable impact. We launch from the coast towards the sea, so it's very local. Noise levels are much lower than originally foreseen, so the impact is minimal, I would say. Even on the local population, so far there was zero complaints.
How often is there a conflict of interest?
Yeah, as I mentioned, for the fisheries. When we launch, fishing boats need to go out of the secure area. This is the most evident example. So, of course, you need to speak with each other and say,
and
okay,
resolve the issue.
And resolve the issue. But it works very well.
Curtis, let me ask you about, it's a question from the audience, what role the anticipated increase in space debris plays for stakeholders and companies?
I think for us, we're a service provider. We use satellite companies as kind of a key service delivery component of our network. One of the reasons why we haven't put all of our eggs in one provider. We don't get into space debris specifically, but we know there are risks with failures and different things of this nature. And I think it's one of the reasons why we diversified our network to have 2 or 3 providers in all of our communities.
In the last few minutes that we have, Shahnaz, if I can get your final thoughts about the way forward for you when it comes to Europe's space industry and the positive impact that it can have on the Arctic.
Of course, so I'm actually really excited to see how the discussions today will turn into action on the ground. But for us, the reality is that in the Arctic's only low Earth orbit, satellites can actually provide reliable, low latency connectivity at high altitudes. And building and maintaining a full low Earth orbit constellation is actually extremely expensive, as I alluded to earlier. We're literally investing billions just to launch, operate, and continually, replenish satellites. So for us, in today's geopolitical and technological landscapes, duplicating European sovereign LEO infrastructure on a national basis probably does not make as much sense as it would look on paper. It's a massive public investment with only limited additional value. So satellites still need to orbit the same polar path, and the coverage can be shared. So this is where, the theme of your panel is extremely timely. This is where cooperation between trusted partners, whether regional, European, allow country to access the same LEO capacity without the enormous costs of building their own constellation, to the benefit of the populations, but also to the benefit of governments for a more secure, resilient connectivity in the region. So yeah, cooperation is the way forward in our view.
Cooperation, the way forward. Thank you very much, Shahiniz. For you, the way forward, Curtis, what is the main gap? What remains the missing link today?
The missing link for us is making sure that every resident in the north has high-quality broadband. We're probably 3/4 of the way there, but there are still gaps. And I think the satellite technology that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years has improved dramatically. LEO has improved dramatically, but it's still not meeting the full needs of the communities that we serve. It is not quite at the same place that a fiber optic cable would be today.
Why not? What needs to happen?
It's more satellites. It's more capacity. It's more bandwidth. In our satellite communities, we're delivering 10, 15, maybe 50 megabits per second. In our fiber communities, we're delivering 1,000 megs to the home or a gig to the home. So satellite technology is improving, but it still is not a complete substitute for fiber. So for us in our communities that are satellite dependent, we're seeing a lot of innovation. We're seeing a lot of providers that are launching new services that we're taking advantage of, but we're still not at the same place that you would see in a major metropolitan city in North America.
For you, Joseph?
Exactly what Curtis said. We need to make the endeavor an industrial one. I think that's the change that's already happening. We need to scale the whole endeavor. We need to launch more. We need to build European infrastructure and use it. And I think that's the task at hand for the next 5 to 10 years.
And how much collaboration should there be transatlantically to make this happen in a faster way? How much cooperation can there be between, let's say, Canada, the Arctic, North America, and European nations?
A lot. I mean, first of all, on all the commercial endeavors, there's a lot of cooperation already happening. Of course, we're also happy to serve Canadian companies. On the governmental side, again, there is a bigger picture at work, but or let's say it's out of our hands. But on the commercial side, we're happy to cooperate. And then it comes down, as I said in the beginning, we need to ask ourselves which part of the infrastructure we want to own and operate and place ourselves.
All right. And on this note, we will end this session. Thank you all very much indeed for your thoughts. Curtis Shaw, Joseph Wiedemann, Shahiniz Bouafia. I hope I didn't mispronounce your name, but thank you so much for joining us and for that insight from Vienna. Thank you all for being here with us for this session. Let me remind you all that we do have a special event tomorrow at 8:15, which is a keynote speech being given by Norway's Prime Minister. So tomorrow morning at 8:15, and then we'll meet back here on stage again for another big picture on building the Arctic and all the infrastructure that is still required. That'll be at 11 a.m. So we'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
har livet vært planlagt for deg. Men nå er det opp til deg. Men det fineste av alt, vi går veien sammen.
Nei, gidder du skru av den tremoloen, eller? Da har du en sånn testsang der. Demo. Da får du bare fortsette å spille litt. Da får du bare fortsette å spille litt. Det er en spesielt fin pianolyd. nå kjenner jeg at jeg har stått litt lenge bak mekseren. Jeg bare tuller nå. Jeg skjønte ikke hvorfor jeg ikke fikk stereo, men så har jeg på Surfacen lagt left-kanalen 2 ganger. Uff. Jeg tror det. Ja.
Jeg telte i går at jeg hadde satt ca. 700 stoler nesten, og så har vi lagt på litt ekstra. I dag, vi har jo de i foyer også. Nei, det er 800 også. Så det blir jo i teorien for deg å tenke på alt som er mellom, ja. Alt som er liksom en linje her da. Ja. Og det er fint å fjerne til og med... Ja,
men jeg skal, vent litt, jeg skal til med litt sammen.
Ja, den som er rett under, ser du på tak, står det nødutgang. Ja. Der pleier det å være død, så du kan ikke ha stoler der. Så fjern ca. 5 i bredden der. Okay. Og her også, 5 i bredden. Ja. I hvert fall første 2 radene. Det skal være 1-2 meter. Okay. Kan du telle med dine føtter. Ja. Strekning bare fjerne.
Men det er vel de strekene her da? Ikke...
Nei, det blir her. Og her er døra, og den er 2 meter. Så kan du tenke 1, 2. Da må de her fjernes, stolene. 5 i bredden her. Så bare begynn med det.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So, I heard you took all the rooms upstairs, right?
Yeah,
have you taken, I just need a yes.
Yes.
Have you taken...
209, it's 208.
It's 208?
Yes.
You've taken it?
No, I'm not taking now. Yeah.
Okay, you are taking, but you think you will be done before you leave today, right?
I think
Vent da, la meg sjekke om det er noe der. Nå må jeg bare flytte og... Så må du snuble etterpå. Ja. Vent litt. Jeg prøver nå. sendte nettopp han bort til dere.
Ok.
Så jeg vet ingenting.
Du har ikke tatt med deg noe?
Nei.
Det ligger ingenting i salen her heller, som vi vet om?
Nei, vi rydder alt. Men jeg har ingen anelse. Jeg må bare bli ferdig med det her.
Ok.
Men du kan gjerne lete.
Lete i salen, liksom, og se om...
Ja, vi har ryddet hver dag og satt
Dere har
ting
ryddet hver
vekk.
dag, ja?
Ja.
Ok.
Så lost and found håper jeg det
Let's
ligger.
have a look.
Ja. Du, jeg skulle bare si ledning her borte. Ja. Har dere hatt det slik mens døra eller veggen har blitt lokket, eller? Shit. Ja, jeg har aldri vært borti det, men da prøver jeg bare. Samme opplegget. Hva med den der, da? For nå kommer den i klem, tror jeg. Når jeg lukker døra, for det kommer jo til å vakuumsiles opp og ned. Nydelig. Ja. Ja, det blir bra.
OK. Yeah. Hei! Føler du at du har kontakt med Solveig nå? Sånn ish? Nei. Jeg syns det er fint liksom, med en sånn så lenge ikke det ser unaturlig ut. Ja. Vi har vel mulighet bare sånn. Eller kommer enda litt mer fram? Hadde du mulighet til å komme bitte litt? OK, er dette bra? Vi prøver. Så bare justerer vi etter hvert. OK. Nå sang jeg liksom stemning. OK. Og det er tidens skygge, sant? Ja. Det er den som...
Ja. OK.
OK, er vi klare?
Ja.
For min del føles det oppleves det veldig høyt. Nesten det er kanskje da jeg Ja, så kanskje bare litt mindre av meg.
Samme, egentlig. Eller sånn særlig liksom de høye eller sånn høye Ja. Ja, litt. Og bitte litt piano også. Ja, litt ned.
Er det en grei balanse ellers? Ja.
Ja.
Hvordan hører man den slutten?
Jeg hørte den ganske bra. Jeg hørte det langt ute. Eller jeg følte det var masse ekko. Ja. Oi. Oi.
Er det liksom
Skal vi spørre?